Good afternoon, folks, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We still have quite a few people logging in, so we're going to give them a few minutes to get settled, and we'll get started in a few minutes. Thanks. Good afternoon, folks. Again, we have quite a few people still logging in, so I just want to give them a moment to get settled, and we will get started in just a few minutes. Thank you. All right, well, thanks for being patient, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. So again, welcome and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Indico release webinar introducing Indico IPA 4.0. My name is Jeremy Stinson, and I'm excited to be hosting today's session. Before we get started with today's webinar, I wanted to take care of a few housekeeping items. First, the webinar will be available on demand after the live session. We'll be sure to send a follow-up note after today's webinar with a link to the recording. Next, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question for our speakers, please feel free to send it through the Ask a Question tab at the bottom of the screen. We'll be answering at the end the questions at the end of today's session. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we'll be sure to follow up afterwards. Next, I'd like to run through today's agenda to give you a sense of what to expect. First, we'll start by talking through the Indico Advantage and why we feel like we are offering the market something truly unique. Then we'll talk through what's new with the release of Indico 4.0. After that, we'll get into a live demo to show you the new functionality with the 4.0 release. After that, we'll have a live case study with Chatham Financial. Then we'll talk through what's on the roadmap for the remainder of 2020 and beyond. And then we'll finish up with some Q&A. Next, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Tom Wild brings 25 years of experience in solving the complex problems of digital content to the role of CEO of Indico. Prior to joining Indico, Tom was the Chief Product Officer at C-Sense, a leading data management provider, and founder of Ramp, an enterprise video content management company. Tom also held senior roles at FastSearch, Miva Systems, and Lycos. He has extensive experience with company building and venture-backed startups and holds an MBA in entrepreneurial management from Wharton. Sasha Fries serves as Indico's lead product manager, where she is responsible for driving the product vision and roadmap execution for Indico's IPA platform. Prior to joining Indico, Sasha led the product management function at TrueFit, an AI-driven personalization platform for footwear and apparel retailers. Sasha has also held product roles at Scenage Learning and Fidelity Investments. Last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Christopher Wells. Christopher is the Chief Data Scientist at Chatham Financial and leads a team of data scientists and engineers located in the US and Europe. The team supports projects ranging from cloud data infrastructure to smart automation to extracting deep insights using modern machine learning techniques. Prior to leading this team, Christopher held roles on Chatham's front and back office quant teams, building enterprise-scale derivative and risk models, as well as custom client analytics and deliverables. Prior to joining Chatham, he was assistant professor of physics at Houghton College. He holds a PhD in theoretical physics from the Johns Hopkins University, where he studied theories of dark matter, dark energy, and non-standard cosmologies. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Tom to get us started.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. And thanks everyone for joining us here today. We're super excited about this release, a very significant set of enhancements to the Indico IPA product. I thought I'd start by setting the table a little bit here. Some of this may be redundant for folks on the call who have prior exposure to Indico, but as table setting here, I think it'll be helpful for context to understand some of the exciting new updates we're releasing here. Specifically around the Indico Advantage, we believe we are the market's first and only complete solution for document intake and understanding, able to deal with all ranges of document types, structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. Historically, this has been a difficult problem and sort of an unsolved white space in the market, and we feel like we are the first solution to really be able to handle this whole spectrum. The Indico Advantage is really based on 4 key pillars, the first of which is the fact that we seek to empower your process owners. We built our application to face the subject matter experts, the people closest to the data and the documents, and help empower them to deliver and take advantage of this deep learning technique to solve the document understanding problem. The second key pillar for Indico is freedom from templates and rules. Obviously, unstructured is not a new problem. It's been around for decades, but basically we've all been constrained by using 2 very simple techniques to try to understand documents, and that's some form of regular expressions, zonal-based OCR, and those kinds of techniques. Indico's breakthrough is we don't rely on those techniques. We allow you to build these custom models with a very tiny amount of training data using Indico transfer learning. The third pillar of our differentiation here is no black boxes. While we are using sophisticated AI techniques to solve this document understanding problem, we believe that customers have the right to be able to completely understand how the machine is making its decisions and to be able to remediate and correct any mistakes the machine makes in an intuitive, user-friendly manner. So no black boxes at Indico. And lastly, we are global innovators in harnessing deep learning to solve natural language processing type challenges like document understanding. Indico transfer learning specifically is the secret sauce here that enables everything I just described. We started by building a huge generalized model with over 500 million documents and images to teach it context. The missing piece here that's existed for decades is the computer has been very poor at understanding context. With Indico transfer learning, we basically deliver that context to the customer and allow you to build custom machine learning models, we call them docbots, with only about 200 labeled examples. What happens at runtime is the generalized model transfers its vast contextual understanding of language onto the specific vernacular that the customer trains the custom model on. And by doing so, we sort of trick the model into thinking that you've labeled tens of thousands of examples. Third, to capture this high quality training data, we knew we needed to face the subject matter expert. And Sasha's going to take you through an end-to-end demo here showing how a non-data scientist can harness this technology to build these custom models and workflows and solve these document understanding challenges. And lastly, transfer learning provides a distinct advantage in terms of its compute footprint. AI is very computationally greedy and expensive to deploy. Transfer learning allows us to do that at about an 8 times more efficient rate than sort of traditional machine learning stacks. So transfer learning kind of underpins, I should say, the whole application that you're going to see here as Sasha walks you through all of the great advancements we've brought to the table, as well as what Chris will show you in terms of Chatham's use of Indico IPA. From a deployment standpoint, these are sort of framing for some of the enhancements you're going to see today. Very typically in a workflow that is deployed with Indico IPA, you have a series of inbound documents. These can be scanned or native documents. Typically, they're PDFs of some flavor. We have OCR built into the engine. You start by building these custom models with Indico Teach. Here's where you upload your 200 samples and label them. Next, you can orchestrate these custom models into a sequence using Indico's workflow tool. Sasha's going to show you that. Today is the debut of this exciting new functionality that allows you to visualize how your process is working. Third, you're able to make sure you can understand and correct any mistakes the workflow is generating through our human-in-the-loop interface, Indico Review. Brand new, we're debuting that today as well. Once you've verified the output from your workflow, that gets pushed downstream, but very importantly, any corrections you make feed the staggered loop. And Sasha is also going to show a set of enhancements around our award-winning Indico Explain functionality, allowing you to introspect and remediate your custom models using our point-and-click interface. And once you've captured those improvements, you can flip them into production and improve your overall workflow. So you're going to see improvements today across Teach and Explain, as well as the debut of our workflow solution and review as well. So very excited to share this with you. With that said, I'm going to turn you over to Sasha Fries. Sasha is the product manager for Indico IPA, and she's going to walk us through sort of table setting around the enhancements and then our live demo. Sasha, over to you.
Thanks, Tom. And I'm super excited to be here today to talk about IPA 4.0. A lot of this feature and functionality that we're going to be talking about and showing today, we've been talking about and implementing, for the past 3 or 6 months. So it's really something that's close to my heart and something I'm very excited to show. So as Tom mentioned, one of our core technologies at Indico is Indico Transfer Learning. And while we will be spending the majority of today discussing and demoing the application itself, I'd like to briefly touch on our updates and new functionality as it relates to machine learning technology. We've created a generalized document understanding model that works similarly to our generalized context model to gain signals from the document layout itself that adds to our Indico Transfer Learning capabilities. This creates additional signals for custom models to use to improve performance and accuracy from structural clues in the document. Examples of this would be headers, footers, bulleted items, and table detection. We've also made update to model types with hints for classification models and generalized form detection and extraction. We're colloquially referring to hints model because, as the name implies, when hints are provided to the model to help with the training effort, it's using the document-specific vernacular. And with forms, we have enhanced our ability to detect and extract form data using similar machine learning technology to document understanding. So these are great new initiatives that we've been making related to our underlying core technology of transfer learning. Going to what we have in the app, one of the key updates that we've made and that I'm super excited to tell you about and show you how we've really integrated this on document labeling functionality into Teach and into Review. You can now label right on the context of the document that SMEs are so familiar with so that they can quickly and easily create custom models without having to hunt and peck through raw text. Our Indico Explain also has we've relaunched our extraction metrics, and with this relaunch, there is now full, transparent, and actionable metrics for every step of your workflow, fulfilling our promise of no black boxes. Indico Workflow, our visualization tool, is now offering the ability to see all the document touch points, settings, and configurations for all of your custom models from the point that it's that unstructured data as input or semi-structured, and then getting your structured output at the very end. And our final new module, and one that I'm also extremely excited to show you, is Indico Review. This module introduces closed loop learning and human in the loop validation station to the application. We've heard the call time and time again from customers and prospects that it's been a real challenge to find an intuitive interface to be able to do these exception handling and character corrections. And we think we've really nailed it with this tool. And finally, we have several API updates. We've not only created parity within our APIs, but we have libraries available in Python, Java, and C#, where you're able to create those custom workflows, where you're able to configure what metadata you'd like from your PDF text extraction, or what we refer to as OCR, and also be able to configure your document submission output. What are the fields that are most important to you? What would you like to see in that JSON output? Not only did we update these, but we've also relaunched them with GraphQL as backing each of these APIs. And this makes it easier to find and configure your data, as well as introducing tools that we have within our applications like GraphQL, so that you can empower people who maybe are not as code heavy as a developer. And so with that, I'd love to launch into the demo. We have been working, as I mentioned, we've been working really hard to create and update new areas of the application, as well as continuing to enhance areas that you're already familiar with. And we've updated almost every part of this application. So starting today with workflows, we're going to show you this brand new module, as Tom mentioned, that will allow customers to orchestrate and visualize a set of custom models and show all the steps along the way. So as you can see here, we have our input, which was PDFs, which were a mix of bill of lading and invoices that have gone through OCR extraction to get that raw text out of those documents. We've then classified them as either bill of lading or invoice documents. And then we're taking extractions from each of the bill of lading and invoices with the information that matters most. And then we're receiving our structured output at the end. And as you can see here, we also give you all of the settings, how we've linked the models together, and any other information that might be relevant to your given teach task. But before we get into things like model training, labeling, or even workflow creation, you can always add users with specific permissions to your data set through the user administration screen. We've consolidated our permissions to the data set level. So any additions, removals, or modifications to those permissions can easily cascade through the data set and all their related tasks and settings. If you just enter in their email and select their role, so I'm going to add our beta account here and select that they are going to be a labeler and reviewer, meaning this person can now both train a teach model as well as review the output of document submission. I can easily add them, and then they will be able to be participants in any tasks on down the line as it pertains to that role. We also have updates to teach, as I mentioned. So now that I've added on my team to my task, I can go in and start labeling my data. So launching into this screen, we'll see an invoice. So this document has gone through the workflow and it has been classified as an invoice and ended up here with these particular label keys that we're looking to extract, which include line item total, vendor, line item amount, and invoice number. And now if I have any other team members that I've added to this task, they can feel free to go in and start labeling as well. In training the model to capture each of these keys, I can easily do it on document using the layout of the PDF. Invoice layout varies based on the vendor that issues them. So we can see how Indico Transfer Learning uses the text within the context of the document rather than the placement, templates, or other potential cues for this particular use case. So when we're looking at this PDF, which is an extremely clean scan of a PDF, we know that the OCR raw text is living behind this document, and that's what we're going to be extracting. So consistent with our user-facing goal of a subject matter expert being able to come in here and create the custom model, we focused on delivering an interface that's intuitive and user-friendly. We've included a variety of labeling modes to make the model training as efficient as possible, and I can label using either text highlighting or bounding box tools. So to give you an example, you can always label using drag the same way that you would highlighting a document. You can double click to highlight a word, or you can triple click to highlight a whole line. And then we have bounding box, which allows you to collect blobs of text. So let's say this was a clause within a contract that you wanted to collect, or in this case, what makes it super easy, you can collect more tabular content, just like so. I've already labeled about 100 invoices here as part of this data set. So I'm going to turn on my predictions, which I'm already receiving. And as you can see, they show up with this highlighted box around them. And what I see as part of my predictions is my confidence level, how confident the model is that Amazon Web Services, Inc. is the vendor on this document. And then I could reject it or accept it. So in this case, that is the vendor, I will accept it. Let's say this was not, in fact, the invoice number, I could reject it. And in the left-hand rail, you can see that a few things are happening as I'm proceeding through this document. Pills are showing up on the left-hand side. I've labeled this text as blue, which is not exactly line item, but it shows the benefit as well as the vendor. And then I can also see if I'm getting context clues from the layout of the document that I likely want to go to this second page and find the predictions that are on this page. So I'm going to accept a couple. You can see the pill showing up. And then as I've completed this, I'm going to be able to submit it. And as we can see, my model performance, regardless of the layout, this looks completely different than the Amazon invoice that we just saw. It's still able to find relatively accurate predictions, showing the power of Indico transfer learning and how it can tolerate variation in the documents that the workflow will process. So now that I know the performance of my model as indicated by some of the confidence levels I'm seeing and the predictions on document, I will go over to Indico Explain. And this is the explain page for that same document that we just saw with on document labeling. And here we see that we offer comprehensive AI explainability as part of our corporate mission to ensure that there are no black boxes in our product. Indico Explain also offers a collaboration point between data scientists and subject matter expert, which is also a key pillar of what we're trying to deliver. And this way you can easily introspect and remediate model performance issues through this interface. Just as a quick refresher before we jump into what we're seeing here on the screen, I just want to remind everybody that Indico IPA automatically builds an 80-20 train test split to generate these metrics, which means you no longer have to use the painful machine learning approach of understanding a model's performance by having separate holdout and ground truth sets to be able to evaluate a model. So with Indico IPA 4.0, we've completely relaunched our extraction explainability, and I'm super excited to show you all the ways that you can utilize it to understand your model's performance. So here in this metrics area, you see that we are able to provide metrics by both class and model. And one key differentiator that we have with Indico Explain is these class level metrics. And we have 4 different ways to look at the span type, which is the extraction text as it relates to predictions from the model and labels that I personally have provided through that on document labeling interface. The 4 different types are exact. This is the model's prediction perfectly matches the labeled extraction. And this is the most aggressive way of finding your model's performance. We also have superset, which is the model's predictions contain the correct extraction, but it's also captured some other irrelevant characters. Overlap, which is the model prediction contains part of the correct extraction, but may also contain irrelevant characters and may or may not be a partial match. Overlap really is where we're able to apply a lot of post-processing steps to really get that extraction to sing and correlate to what you're looking for in your downstream system. And then token, this is where when we do OCR processing or with text, a document is broken up into tokens or word pieces, and we evaluate whether each token's label is correct or incorrect. So looking at different span types can tell you different stories about your model progress. So for this example, we're going to be looking at total. and specifically at precision and recall. So if you see here for the total class, which is what we were labeling on document, I have a precision of 0.5 and a recall of 0.6. However, if I look at overlap, I see that precision has gone up by 7% and recall has gone up by 69%. So here I've selected total as the key that I'd like to look at and really be able to analyze what's going on with the labels and predictions. And as I scroll through here, I don't see anything that's too surprising until I get to this, which is where I have accidentally labeled USD as part of the total label, which is not my intention. So what I can do is I can launch teach here, and I can scroll down to find the example of that included USD here at the bottom, and I can easily relabel it. So I'm just going to remove that USD here, remove that space. Whoops. Here we go, and I can save it. And this is something that in traditional ML approaches with finding and fixing, it could be very difficult and it could require a data scientist to help, but we've been able to correct this in a matter of moments. Another key part of Indico Explain is the ability to try it out. So as you can see, there's a text box here at the top. I have found this invoice online. It is just a sample invoice that somebody has put together. As you can see, there's no names. I just Googled it. And so what I can do is I can just copy and paste right out of this into try it out. And by submitting it here, it's able to find line item values, line items themselves, as well as the total for that area of text. And it has never seen that document before. All of our invoices and bill of ladings in our data set are from Indico. We can also do this in workflows. So we're able to try it out as well in workflows to receive both the classification and the extraction information and to see how well our workflow is performing as a whole. So it's great that my extraction model is performing. Let's just make sure everything fits together. So what I can do is I can upload that document. I have that invoice right here. I will open it. And then as an output, once it's processed, I receive this JSON. And while this is a bit of an eye test, I have put it together in a format that is easier to read and that we can take a look at exactly what the output looks like. And while this is for one document, this is what the output would look like for your productionized process as you're submitting documents through your workflow. So here we have the label of invoice number, and it was able to find number 123 with a 99.6% confidence rate. So taking a look back at this invoice, that is in fact correct. And then just taking a look at one of the other examples. So wireframes from a landing page was also on there, and it is in fact a line item. And our model right now with only 100 examples labeled was able to guess this with 92.7% confidence. So we're sure that, as I've labeled those other 100 sample documents for invoices, my model would be super performant in being able to create a productionized automated process for bill of lading and invoices. So I've checked out my model, I've trained it, I've checked out the metrics. The next thing to do, once I put my model in production, is to go to our human in the loop, brand new module, Indico Review. This is a critical element to any AI-driven process automation. You have to have the option for human intervention to achieve the desired levels of accuracy. And this is something that was clear from customer feedback, from everything that we've heard. It's been a challenge to get an intuitive interface that allows them to catch and remediate errors quickly and efficiently. So using our demo example workflow, our relatively simple example of bill of lading and then invoice and bill of lading extractions, I've uploaded 21 documents to our review queue. And in review, we have two separate queues here. The review queue, which is for any person who has reviewer in their role, or managers and analysts. And the exception queue is where there's something going on with the document that requires a little bit further intervention and a little bit more subject matter expertise in what's going on with the workflow itself, and maybe other nodes, meaning like the classification, understanding what is a bill of lading and what is an invoice and how they pertain to each other. So launching into review, we'll see here we have an invoice at the hat, and I'm putting on my reviewer hat. And you'll see first is that we have that same contextual format for review as we had for on-document labeling. But I am able to see beyond just the document itself and find that all my predictions are appearing here in the right-hand screen, as well as their character extractions that are vital to the success of any downstream system. So here we find that it's easy to correct things. So let's say that these L's were supposed to be I's. I can accept this prediction, and this is now full sec IIC. I'm getting clues as to what I'm doing in the interface by getting this little pencil arrow, as well as this check here that says that I've interacted with the vendor key and it's completed. And then, for instance, let's say that the vendor name was not able to be extracted from this document or was not clear for some reason. I'm also given the option to provide no value, which is really asking the reviewer to explicitly note that they were not able to find something for that label key on this document. We've mimicked the behavior of on-document functionality by still having the predictions on document, as well as being able to see their confidence level, rejection, and accepting them right here in the right-hand rail. And as a reviewer works through and they've done all the QA that they need to do, they've accepted or rejected all of the keys on document, they're able to submit it next, and then it's ready for output as soon as the next button is hit. But if this document, however, had been not in good order for some reason, if it had accidentally been misplaced in the bill of lading and invoices workflow when it should have gone to a different queue, or in the case that one of our models misclassified this invoice as a bill of lading, it's easy to reject it. And so I'm just going to push the reject button to show you how our exceptions queue works. I'm going to reject it. I'm going to come in here. Right now, I only have 3 documents in my exceptions queue. And then as I reload this, you'll see that the number has gone up to 4. And so when I launch into my exceptions queue, I'll see this screen, which is just the same as our on-document labeling screen without any labels or predictions on it. And in this case, I want to be able to orient this document, which, we felt came into the queue in the wrong way. Let's say hypothetically it had been classified as a bill of lading. Our person reviewed it. They rejected it because it should have had a different answer key associated with it, the invoices answer key rather than the bill of lading. Then I would select that here. I want to have the invoices extraction label key, and then I would be able to extract all the text accordingly, as well as being able to do any character corrections. So we also added a little bit more functionality here where, let's say you accidentally do not collect all the information that you're looking for this label key. As long as you go over the label that you had provided, it will append to it, which makes it super easy to just collect all the information as needed and then do your simple character corrections if there are even any to complete. The other benefit of this exceptions queue is the reject button behaves a little bit differently for a manager or analyst in this exceptions queue than it does for a reviewer. So if, for instance, this was a bad scan, I couldn't read anything, we need to do something different with it, or in the case that for some reason it was a mortgage document rather than an invoice or a bill of lading, when I push reject, I'm able to optionally provide some context for why I'm rejecting it that will be part of the output. So there's two benefits to this. One, you can provide, semantic language around what it is that happened here. This is not in good order. Or you could do something such as provide a code that would trigger a remediation process through the JSON output as a form of free coding that can optionally be provided to your downstream systems. So now that I've gone over all the new and exciting features that we have in version 4.0 that I'm so excited to get into everyone's hands, I'm going to turn this over to Chris Wells from Chatham Financial for a case study of Indico IPA in action.
Hey, Sasha, thanks. And thanks for that demo and thanks for driving these slides. As Sasha said at the beginning, I'm the Chief Data Scientist at Chatham Financial, and I'll start with these obligatory marketing slides. But the point here is not giving you the Chatham elevator pitch. The point here is that this really tells the story for why Indico as a company and IPA as a platform have been so useful to us in the past couple of years. So one, we're a global organization. We're active in capital markets every day, hedging, and doing all the back office stuff that comes with that, as well as active in the debt markets, both consulting and managing positions. We have clients around the world, and the key here is that we see much more breadth in the markets that we're in than anyone else, including broker dealers. They see a lot more depth and a lot more activity, but we see a full breadth of what's out there. And if we go on to the next slide here, we're active across sectors, so corporates, real estate, financial institutions, banks, and insurance cos, as well as private equity and infrastructure funds. And we offer a variety of services in those areas, and all of them create documentation. And so that takes us to where I want to start on the next slide here. We have lots of documents annually. Human beings in our firm with deep expertise in these markets review more than 10,000 derivative confirms. They review more than 10,000 deck documents and analyze them for everything. Debt covenants, financial key terms, and nowadays, the thing that's on everybody's mind is IBOR replacement language. We have a corpus of roughly 30,000 ISDAs, probably the highest, as I said, the highest variety of ISDAs that anyone has in the market, because we transact with everybody for everybody. And that comes along with a large corpus of credit support annex documents as well. And of course, everybody's favorite thing is email. And we process more than 100,000 emails throughout the year from clients, from regulators. And I can't leave out the miscellany term sheets, pre-deals, regulatory filings. Basically, you name it, we see it. Let's go on to the next one. So let me talk about a concrete example of how we've put IPA to work. This was actually the process that we started with in our POC with Indico. And as I'll talk about a little bit later, we went through a pretty robust selection process, including comparing what Indico could do to what we thought we could build ourselves. So just like everybody, we have a monolithic SQL server, which is the ground truth for just about everything that happens at Chatham, as well as a blob store that holds everything from the PDF of a confirm or an ISDA to someone's favorite list of Judas Priest songs. Everything's there. That access layer, my team built an integration using tools like Jupyter and Excel, stuff that's out there with any data science team or any financial services firm. And right in the middle, we used Indico to glue that together. And that's our NLP layer. So a cap confirm comes in, it gets uploaded to our document store, and that triggers a process whereby our custom software pulls that document down, feeds it to Indico's PDF extraction layer, pulls out the key terms, and feeds that downstream to what we call our output layer. And here we've got the symbol for a compass, which is a piece of technology that we built in Windows Forms 20 years ago. It feeds information back into our SQL server. Python script puts together a nice formatted email that closes the loop with the expert who reviews the document. And then that expert, instead of having to go through the document line by line to find key terms and compare them with what the client's reporting, the user, the expert, just has to look at the email digest and can see green or red check boxes and say, yeah, this is good to go, or I need to flag this for someone to review downstream. The benefits of this pipeline in the next slide are pretty easy to imagine. Probably don't have to tell you the full story, but let's take a look at those benefits in the next slide. So bottom line, processing time is way down. We replaced an average, sometimes much longer, of 15 minutes of eyes on work by highly trained resources, people that are deep in these markets, and could be working anywhere in a major dealer bank in the back office. We replaced that with an automated review. And one of the big benefits from this for us was that this cleared a long-standing rolling backlog of over 1,000 docs. So in our almost 30-year history, we built up this backlog of just docs that hadn't been processed. They were waiting in a queue. Some would come in, and then a new transaction gets done, and that fills up the queue again. Once we rolled out our first version of this model, that backlog got cleared in one day, literally one 24-hour period. And that was the first time we were without a backlog of documents to process in, I think, 2 decades, which was a huge victory. The bottles were popped on that day, for sure. Training was pretty straightforward. The models were trained by document experts. We had a lot of nice help consulting from Indico, and my data science team functioned as sort of the bridge between what the tech can do and what's available on the platform, and just consulting about how to approach a process like this. And I think with a lot of the tools that are being demoed today in 4.0, that process is even simpler than it was, a year and a half ago. One of the key things about this training is that you're taking your intellectual property, whatever it is that you're doing with these documents, whether it's sort of a back office operational process or a key client deliverable, you're baking that IP into a software process. I really love the graph of the workflow that just sort of shows, it's almost like a schematic of the map in a subject matter expert's head, showing the thought process as you go through classifying a doc, finding key terms, extracting them and processing them. Up until this point at Chatham, those sorts of things were being held in the consciousness of subject matter experts. And I think all of us worry about key person risk. What if Bob or Jill gets hit by a bus? And for things like this, we don't have to worry about that because we've codified that IP into a process that's repeatable, documented, and understandable by anyone who can get into it. Finally, this creates optionality for us. That document review is actually one expensive step in a multi-step, multi-check process. We have a 6 eyes process that all of our documents of this type go through. We took out one step, the middle, but the door is now open to move this automation both upstream to the point where the client uploads a document. It could be processed there, or downstream so that the final reviews and those last double checks can be done in an automated fashion. And big picture, I'm sort of an abstract thinker, and I like to take the concrete example and pull back and think about what it could be. This allows us to reimagine Chatham's offering as sort of a straight through pipeline where a doc comes in, key things get sucked out, and then it comes out the other end, rather than a human-driven assembly line with everyone sort of sitting at the conveyor belt with their hammer or chisel or whatever it is. So those are the benefits. Let me talk for a second in the next couple slides about how we got here. If you're like me, you're either a data scientist, a highly technical person, or you interact with those people every day. Hopefully you love it the way I do. And the question you or those folks are asking is, well, we could have done this. Why didn't we just do it ourselves? And it's a very fair question. And myself as a technical person, I like to build fancy models and show off what I can do. So the high level answer is we started to. we went down the path of knowing that we had key information, interesting insights in both that and potential process efficiencies that could be gained by processing documents in an automated way. So, you know, myself and a few other quant PhD types downloaded TensorFlow and started building tools and labeling documents. And we stole time from some UX folks to make that approachable by non-experts. And then I randomly stumbled upon Indico, which was a fortuitous moment, I think. And it was fortuitous because data science is a startup at Chatham. 2 years ago, when I began contemplating this journey and this new vertical for Chatham, we had state-of-the-art 2005 technology, a monolithic SQL Server database, you know, standard data infrastructure like a well overused internal network drive, and then just scads, countless numbers of Excel spreadsheets living on people's desktops. And so as a startup, we really started from scratch. Most of my team's time has been spent building modern data infrastructure, utilizing cloud, putting things in data lakes or warehouses so that they're more easily accessible and more flexible. So trying to rebuild from scratch an entire NLP engine, while feasible in terms of the talent and the resources we had available, was not feasible in terms of just the time that needed to be spent and where our biggest priorities were. And of course, that ignores the fact that the problem is bigger than model training. I think, you know, any data scientist worth his salt, any machine learning engineer that's sort of has the right background, if you gave them labeled data, they're going to be able to make models out of it. And that's not the hard part. It is a hard part, but it's not the hard part. I've shared this anecdote with a few folks at Indico, but I don't know that I've shared it widely. During our POC, we had the group that was sort of doing the build case, including myself in the room, as well as some of our business sponsors. And during the demo, our chief product engineer muted the mic and said, "Look, I was trying to build a UX. If we go this route of build versus buy and we go build, I'm just going to steal this UX." And he was fully ready to rip off the entire thing from Indico. And hopefully the folks in Indico see that as a big compliment, because that's really where you make contact between the data, that IP baking in that I talked about, and the machine learning itself. If the subject matter experts can't or don't want to work with labeling the data, and it's hard, it's not going to happen, and the venture's going to fail. More than that, you will be a victim of your own success if you do a good job at this internally. I'll show you in the next slide how we've grown over the last 18 months. And one of the things that you see is just, if you have a successful project, people in the company are going to talk about it, and then you're going to have a bunch of projects at your door. And for me, especially with a startup team running very lean, we would not have been able to meet that demand. And again, you find yourself in a place where an initiative fizzles out. So for us at Chatham, in this partnership with Indico, we have been beneficiaries of our own success, humbly speaking. We have ongoing projects with every business vertical and most practice area teams, things like accounting or transaction document processing and client onboarding. 3 use cases are in production. Now, that may sound small over the course of 18 months, but at a mature organization with its own great share of bureaucracy, getting new tools and new capabilities to be plugged into core offerings to clients or internal consultants is a big deal. And I think that will probably resonate with a few on the call. And there are more in the pipe. We expect at least 2 more use cases to go into production by the end of the year, and there are a couple that are close. So over this 18-month period, well over 50 internal Indico users. The number grows every day. Early on, we kept the circle tight, worked exclusively on that project that started as a POC and is now in production. And these days, I get questions from people I haven't even met at the company who now have Indico accounts, and they're asking me about how to label this or that, which I take to be a really exciting thing. I don't know if Indico would share this, but we have pushed them hard on both our use of the models and the types of things that we're doing. We've trained hundreds of individual models across many, many different use cases, production and otherwise. We've really stretched it to its limits, and it's held up, and people are still happy, and we still grow in terms of who's using it. Those models span more than a dozen experiments and proofs of concept, and we've installed Indico sort of as a development environment on-prem, where we may have documents that are more sensitive or processes that are more speculative in terms of the use case. And we also have a production environment up in the Amazon cloud, in our virtual private cloud. And I can't leave this out. The data science team's headcount grew by 1 over the same period. So we were able to handle building out all the infrastructure. We were able to handle building out all the use cases and helping business owners to make the case to executive team leadership and deliver on model training and all of the data pipelining that was necessary to connect our systems to Indico systems with only growing our headcount by 1, which I think is a huge success. So let me finish up on the next slide. Yeah, this is the standard disclaimer. Swaps have risk. If for some reason you buy a swap after these comments, something's gone terribly wrong. So with that, I'll hand it back over, and I'll thank you for your time and attention.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. That was terrific. I just had a couple of questions for you to follow up there.
Yeah,
really,
please.
A great success story, and you guys have been such terrific and ambitious adopters of IPA. Talk about, if you could, maybe how you see IPA has changed the dynamic between the data science and subject matter expert. You know, how has that impacted your ability to have success at Chatham?
Yeah, the dynamics changed dramatically. At first, at first things are a little bit adversarial. That might be too strong of a term, but at first it's sort of like, the data science guys show up with fancy tools and tricks, and the subject matter experts on the other side of the table are saying, well, like, these documents are tough to work with. My job is hard. A machine could never do this. And that has morphed along the way as we've seen success after success to a place where we're sitting around the table together. We're not on opposite sides, and we're all rolling up our sleeves to get things done. And a big key to that is that it isn't a model of them throwing their data and some sort of process map over the wall to the data science team. Everybody's in the platform, right? So, we're going through a process. We're showing them how to use Teach. We're helping them think about what are the right labels. What's the model architecture, like that, the workflow tab that you showed us? Should it start with a classifier? Can we go straight to extraction? Does a given extraction need to have its own classifier at the end to help us sort out what bucket it falls into to put it in our structured database? So that collaborative piece of this, having one platform that we're all working on together, has really, really helped there. And another thing that I don't know that I've shared this with the Indico team is that this whole process has helped us discover flaws in our own operational rhythms. So, for example, we were working with a team who has deep expertise in DEC documents and debt economics, and they wanted to build an extractor that would pull those terms. Obvious, sort of right over the plate use case. And we set up a team of 6 people all on the Teach task and said, okay, let's agree on the economics. Got the lists, put it in the Teach task. We came back a couple weeks later, they had labeled a couple hundred collaboratively, and the model was terrible. It was just terrible. It couldn't do anything right. And so you pull up that explain functionality and you realize, oh, when Sally labels the document for client X, she includes, the surrounding context of the economic. But when, Jane does it, she only goes right to the economic term. Bob does it, he pulls out the heading of the section as well as the economic term. And so we realized that this product, which is a 25-year-old product for Chatham and has been wildly successful, we don't deliver the same product to every client. And so those moments of discovery where it's like, oh yeah, you can't teach the machine to know that I'm supposed to replicate Bob's way of labeling things. You need a consistent approach. That just makes the product better. So not only are we happy that we're automating sort of banal tasks, everyone's happy that you're really improving the product and making Chatham a better offering.
Yeah, you really touched on it, and we hear this from a lot of clients, which is, how do you create an institutional understanding of the problem rather than the individual understanding? And as you point out, it improves the product, it wrings it out, it drives consensus on the particular deliverable you're trying to make. That's awesome. Well, Chris, thanks so much. This detail's tremendous, and we really appreciate you sharing here today. I'll turn it to Jeremy at this point, back to Sasha and Jeremy to wrap us up.
Thanks, Tom, and especially thanks to Chris for giving us that insight into how Chatham's using Indico.
You got it.
So looking ahead, we've shown you, our great progress within the application based on, customer feedback and things that we really thought would help automate any sort of process. And looking ahead through the end of the year and beyond, here are some highlights that we have from our roadmap. There's multi-language support. We're really looking to broaden our horizons and get into more international markets, and that means language support. So that will be coming down the pipeline relatively soon. We also have use case template galleries. So if you have a use case that has similarly been used, but you're looking to create custom models for your particular organization, we will have a use case template gallery to say, I'm looking at mortgage documents, I'm looking at invoices, and these are things that Indico has created using Indico Transfer Learning. We're not using any information from any of our customers to do so. And this will allow you to create custom models more quickly and more easily. OCR quality enhancements. This is whether your document is difficult to read, and has low quality print on it, if it's a low quality scan, as well as just really being able to refine, is that a 2 or is that an S, and bringing OCR in-house to Indico to make sure that we're offering the best OCR that we can to our customers. Relaunch of workflow analytics. So similarly, where you'd like to know what's happening with each of your models in a workflow, how is your workflow performing once it's been productionized? Knowing things like how many documents are flowing through in a given period, and learning more about the quality overall for a workflow. Typed answer key and normalization. This is our ability to add a post-processing step as part of the application where you tell us, this is a date or this is a place and this is how I would like it formatted. And that post-processing can just happen as a part of setup when you're putting your workflow together. And then just more additional out-of-the-box integrations. If there are specific tools that you use, or even potentially proprietary tools that you use, homegrown tools, we want to make sure that those out-of-the-box integrations really are pushing a button and being able to integrate so that Indico is easy to use from the point that you give us the 200 documents to train to getting that productionized output via JSON. And then we have more. We have a lot on our roadmap beyond just these points. And as always, if there's any feedback or something that you've really been looking for in the application, we would love to hear it. We are highly customer focused at Indico. And so whatever we can do to make the application sing for you, we're looking to do. And I think that's it for the roadmap.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks, Sasha. I think now we're going to move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. So we've got quite a few questions popping up here through the Q&A tab. The first one I'll take, and I think I'll toss this over to you, Tom, is can you briefly discuss the process of model feedback post-deployment? If we're consuming predictions via API integration, is there a process to flag a processed document for follow-up training / labeling?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. And then I just want to add, because we're right at the top of the hour, for those of you who have to jump off, we really appreciate your attention and your attendance today. For those of you who can stay on a bit longer, we'll keep going to work through the questions here, but just really appreciate such a great group today. As for this particular question, yes, we call it the staggered loop learning. There's sort of two modes, if I understand the question correctly. There's two modes for that. If you're using our new Indico review module, that staggered loop is fed automatically when you correct and submit a document, it also branches those corrections off and pushes them back into the model. We call it a staggered loop, as Sasha mentioned, because we're feeding a staged version of the model rather than a production version of the model for good AI governance reasons. And you can use Indico Explain to understand if the model has improved its performance versus the production version. If you're using this in an API setting, the API also includes the ability to feed those corrections, if they're happening in some kind of downstream system, back into Indico, so we can capture those same corrections and feed the model. Good question, though.
Great, thanks. This next one is for Chris. We have someone from the audience who's asked, what were the major challenges you faced when you would look to bring Indico up for a new project or use case internally at Chatham?
Yeah, it's a good one. There were two species of challenge. One is a people challenge. You know, as we started to gain traction with NLP projects, we had a lot of people come to us and say, hey, can you, you know, and I'll use NLP as a verb here, can you NLP my this, right? Email process or whatever, document checking process. And the answer is yes. I think we can, assuming you have the documents. But the question is, you know, who's going to be the subject matter expert who's going to label the docs? Because we're data guys, but we're not specific to your data. Like, we don't have that expertise. And so getting teams to understand that this was going to take a commitment, it might only be a few weeks here and there as you're labeling. I mean, it's no one's full-time job to label anything, but it's going to take some sort of investment. And so we had a lot of projects that sort of looked like low-hanging fruit, but for whatever reasons, you know, the immediate concerns of just running the business or whatever, they couldn't set aside resources. In terms of technical challenges, we grew so fast that, you know, we just outgrew the box that we were on-prem. So one obstacle was taking a mature process like that cap confirm check that I talked about and spinning that up to a place where it could live in the cloud and take some of the burden off of our initial instance. And then we're at a point now where we're actually upgrading our GPUs on that machine because we're handling so much training on-prem right now. So, you know, getting the business to see that they have to invest their people and their IP in going through this sort of thing, and then just technically making sure you have the right hardware as you grow. I think those have been our two biggest challenges.
Awesome, thanks, Chris. This next question, I think I'll send your way, Sasha. I know Indico supports images, but can you talk about Indico's plans to further support use cases that consist of image and videos in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So today we do in the app support image classification. We have tools to use for object detection and image classification, but later this year, we're really looking forward to making both images and videos first-class citizens within our platform. And we'll be doing a lot of work to emulate some of the functionality that you saw for on-document labeling and moving that to be practical for analyzing frames within videos as well as images themselves. So it's on the horizon and it's coming.
Awesome. Another one more sort of specific to product capabilities. Sasha, feel free to take this one as well. Can you talk about Indico's table extraction capabilities? This has been a challenge for us.
Sure. So we have been doing a lot of work in regards to table extractions from things like PDF, being able to identify them, pull the data out in a tabular format so that whatever it is that you're looking to extract from that, whether it be the table itself or specific columns or rows from the table, we're providing the technology to be able to do that. And our ML team worked hard over the past 6 months to really make sure that we had a refined process for that. We also have configurations that are available for knowing where a table is within your document, and we're able to provide that X and Y coordinates for tables as well as the text from the table via OCR, and then also our extraction tools work exceptionally well to be able to pull any information out as needed.
Great, thanks. This next one I will toss to you, Tom. You mentioned your generalized model in the beginning of the presentation. Can you talk through what types of documents your generalized model is based on? Is it mainly business documents?
That's a good question. So we have focused on breadth specifically in the generalized model. If you think back to the main purpose of it, it's to provide as broad a contextual understanding as possible. So across those 500 million documents, they were more business focused, but not exclusively. Quite importantly, they're not domain specific. We found that, and this is a little bit counterintuitive, the broader we built the generalized model, the better it became at handling the specific. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Once we built up, a vast enough context space, there was very little it hadn't seen before, and thus was able to successfully sort of disambiguate the context, regardless of the kind of model our customers are trying to build.
Nice, thanks. And it looks like we got time for one more here. This question says, we have thought of Indico for unstructured use cases. In the beginning of today's presentation, it seems like you're sort of expanding your focus to include all types of documents from structured to semi-structured as well as unstructured. Can you talk about that a bit more? I guess, Tom, I'll toss that one to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the enterprise it doesn't want to have to buy 15 different solutions to solve a problem. And we've heard that, very clearly from our customers, which is, look, if you can solve the entire, document equation and be kind of the sole intake and understanding approach across the enterprise, that has huge value in terms of the efficiency in which you can sort of deploy both the upstream and downstream systems. As you heard, Chatham, Chris, and talk about at Chatham, being able to have sort of a main pipeline through which document flows means your efficiency in terms of how you're deploying that and manage that in the enterprise goes up sharply. So that was really the thinking around expanding our capabilities into structured and semi-structured documents, as well as our key advantages in unstructured.
Great. Well, I was actually going to say, I think we're at the time here. We've gotten so many good questions. I think we should just keep going for a few more minutes. Here's another one for you, Tom. How does Indico take advantage of the latest and greatest in terms of ML research, as well as incorporating models like BERT and Roberta into your generalized model?
Yeah, very importantly, and I think, again, Christopher touched on it a bit, this is rarely a problem about access to algorithms or frameworks and things like that. And importantly, we totally embrace that. So we have an open source project called ENSO, which is a benchmarking tool for transformer-based architectures. And we put that into the market because we really believe that, we want to empower people to be successful with deep learning. What we do is we constantly scan the market for new algorithmic developments. We benchmark those internally on a regular basis, on a monthly basis. And if we find algorithms that are outperforming the current stack that we have, we add them to the product. So Indico customers are future-proofed from an algorithmic standpoint. Inside of Indico already is BERT, Roberta, Oscar, GPT-2, Fine-Tune, and so all of those are already under the hood. And as new ones come out in the market, we deploy those to customers as well.
Awesome, thanks. So we are about 10 minutes past the hour, so I think we're going to conclude today's webinar. I want to thank you all for joining us, and also a huge thank you to our speakers, Tom, Sasha, and Chris. Thanks, guys, for spending some time with us today. As a reminder, we'll follow up with the recording of today's session, as well as answers to any of the questions we were not able to get to. So again, thank you for joining us, and have a great day, everyone.